The president notes in his veto statement, however, that the jury heard the evidence and rendered its verdict. Our system of justice requires respect for their decision. At this moment, our thoughts and prayers should be with the families of the victims of this terrible crime.
O.J. Simpson, Part 1, His Career.
The O.J. Simpson trial rocked the world as one of the most famous celebrities in the U.S. would be arrested and tried for murder. So O.J. Simpson, he was an NFL running back, broadcaster, actor, and advertising spokesman. He was born and raised in a very poor area of San Francisco, but he would go on to be very successful as a college football running back for the University of South California. He was a two-time All-American and won the Heisman Trophy as the NCAA's most outstanding player. So O.J. Simpson served as a great image for rags to riches tale. However, he became friends with many rich old white men as a result of this and didn't really help out those who helped him come up. This also caused Simpson to become very wealthy and have many opportunities, as these rich old white men would be very influential and be able to give him investment in strategies and other opportunities for acting. O.J. lived in his now famous Rockingham estate, which will become the center of this controversy, as much evidence was found here, and O.J. would eventually be arrested here. So our scandal is that in 1995, O.J. was arrested for the murder of his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her acquaintance, Ronald Goldman. Simpson would temporarily go on the run, but would be caught after a slow-speed white Bronco chase at his Rockingham estate. Simpson would controversially be acquitted of all charges, however. So we believe that O.J. was guilty and that his acquittal was due to a combination of bad prosecutors and external political circumstances. So the political climate in LA right now is very violent, as there were many incidents of police brutality against black people. There were many different incidents, including the Rodney King beating, the Latasha Harlan shooting, and the 39th and Dalton trashing. The Rodney King beating would be the most infamous of these, as an African-American male, Rodney King, was involved in a car chase as the LAPD were attempting to pull him over for speeding and driving under the influence. The officers would eventually corner King and handcuff him after groping a female officer, where they would force him on the ground and stomp and hit him with their nightsticks. This whole incident would be recorded on video by George Holliday, and the officers would be arrested, but would all be acquitted due to the fact that the location of the trial got moved from Los Angeles to Simi Valley, which was a notoriously conservative white area. This would cause riots to break out, mostly started by black gang members. In these riots, a murderer white truck driver would be caught by a news chopper, in which the truck driver was pulled from his vehicle, forced to lay down, and had his head crushed in by a rock. The other incidents, the Harlan shooting, Harlan was a black teen, and she was shot by a Korean grocer for stealing. It would eventually be revealed that Harlan wasn't trying to steal at all, and the grocer was just instigating stuff and obviously shot her. The 39th and Dalton trashing was a black family home that was completely destroyed by LAPD officers that claimed they were looking for drugs. So Simpson did have a relationship prior to his with Nicole. He was married for 12 years to a woman named Margaret L. Whitley, who was a black woman. There were never any reported instances of physical abuse, but in 1980, according to court documents, after their divorce, Margaret refused to move out of their Brentwood house and threatened him with physical violence, libel, and slander to call the police. O.J. met Nicole in 1977 when she was 18 at a private club when she was a waitress. O.J. started dating Nicole while he was still married to Marguerite, who was pregnant at the time. 6 years after Simpson divorced Marguerite, he married Brown and had 2 children with her. However, abuse incidents would soon begin to happen, as Nicole's secret journal revealed over 60 cases of some sort of domestic abuse in a period of 16 years. Some of her journal entries showed that O.J. would beat her for many hours. He beat her during sexual intercourse, and he beat her while she was pregnant with her child. O.J.'s narcissism is another thing that needs to be covered. O.J. was extremely self-centered, which was caused by the fame he built up from his football career. After the divorce between Brown Simpson and O.J. stalked her and made threats of killing her, and he frequently broke into her house. This is a result of him having the mentality of getting whatever he wants. He was an abuser, the worst kind, one with money, power, and fame. Nicole was not a wife, but rather a possession, like the big LA mansion, the Heisman Trophy, and the NFL records. So Now it's time to cover the timeline on the night of the murder. So all of these times are in Pacific Standard Time. So at 6:30 p.m., Nicole Simpson goes to the Mezzaluna restaurant with her children and acquaintances. Nicole Simpson, and then at 8 p.m., Nicole Simpson and her children leave Mezzaluna and stop for ice cream, arriving home. At 9:15, Nicole Simpson's sister calls Mezzaluna restaurant to notify him that Nicole had left her glasses at the restaurant. Waiter Ron Goldman volunteers himself to return them to her. And then at 9 to 9:30 p.m., Brian Cato Kalin, who is a friend of O.J. Simpson and staying at O.J.'s Rockingham estate, go to McDonald's for dinner. At 9:48 and 9:50, Ronald Goldman leaves Mezzaluna with the glasses in a white envelope. At 10:15, Pablo Finevis, a neighbor of Nicole Simpson, overhears crying and constant barking of a dog whilst watching TV. At 10:25 p.m., the limo driver that was responsible for taking OJ to the LAX airport to go to Chicago by the name of Alan Park arrives at Simpson's house. At 10:40 p.m., Cato hears 3 loud thumps on the outside wall of his room. Then at 10:40 and 10:50, Alan Park. In between 10:40 and 10:50, Alan Park buzzes the intercom many times. However, he gets no response. Then at 10:55, Alan Park calls his boss to tell him that Simpson is not home. He is told to wait until 11:15, as Simpson is usually late. Shortly before 11 p.m., Alan Park sees a 6-foot, 200-pound black person walking across the driveway towards the direction of the house. And at about 11 p.m., Cato moves towards the front of the house to check the noise. He sees the limousine driver at the gate. Several seconds later, Alan Park once again buzzes the intercom. However, this time Simpson responds, claiming he overslept and that he had just gotten out of the shower. Between 11 and 11:15, Simpson places his bags in the limousine. At 11:15, the limousine leaves for LAX. 11:35, it arrives, and then at 11:45, Simpson leaves for Chicago on his American Airlines flight. So the next day, at 12:10 a.m., the deceased bodies of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman were found outside Nicole Simpson's townhouse. At about 5 a.m., Mark Furman and Philip Van Natter, who are detectives on the case, arrive at Simpson's home. Between 5:15 and 5:30, the detectives examine a bloodstain on Simpson's Ford Bronco. At 5:40 to 5:50, Detective Furman jumps the wall so police are able to get into the estate. Once on the grounds of Simpson's homes, the detectives wake up Simpson's daughter, Arnell, who is sleeping in the guest house. She takes the police to the house and calls Kathy Aranda, a longtime assistant of her father. From 7 a.m. to 7:30 a.m., Detective Furman declares Simpson's estate a crime scene and goes to get a warrant to search the house. So the next major breakthrough in the case was the white Bronco chase. So Simpson was charged with the murders and would have a warrant placed on him. That day, that would be the day that the Bronco chase would go down, as Simpson was supposed to turn himself in. However, Simpson hid in a sports utility vehicle driven by A.C. Cowlings, a longtime friend and former teammate of Simpson. Law enforcement was informed that Simpson had a gun to his head, so Simpson's vehicle was chased at low speeds for over an hour. Simpson's attempted escape was nationally televised, where Simpson had thousands of fans lining the streets in support of him. It would end at Simpson's home in Brentwood, where he was placed under arrest and taken into custody. So the defendants on the case are Johnny Cochran, Robert Kardashian, Robert Shapiro, and F. Lee Bailey. So Johnny Cochran was one of those most famous civil rights lawyers in the U.S. He's basically the Michael Jordan of civil rights lawyers. Robert Kardashian was kind of the face of his whole defense team. He was OJ's personal friend. He was very close with him. Robert Shapiro was a very, very good lawyer that was also friends with OJ, and he served as more of a logistical defender. Same with F. Lee Bailey. F. Lee Bailey was fairly new to the game of law. However, he would go on to eventually be the main reason that OJ would win the case, as he exposed Dennis Fung's mistakes when collecting evidence. So the prosecutors were Marcia Clark, William Hodgman, and Christopher Darden. Marcia Clark was a very good lawyer. She was publicly chosen by the DA of Los Angeles, which was a decision that the DA would later stick to, as she was very, very good lawyer. However, the selection of Christopher Darden would be the reason that the prosecution would ultimately lose, as Chris Darden would make OJ try on his glove, which he would controversially not fit. And there are many reasons that's controversial, which we will get to in a minute. The judge was Lance Allen Ito. He was heavily scrutinized for the way he allowed the trial to be so publicized, and the way he allowed OJ to present his case as like more of a black versus white case. So key moments were Chris Darden making OJ try on the glove, the Mark Furman tapes being exposed, and Dennis Fung being exposed for incorrectly gathering evidence. So why we think OJ was guilty. So the glove fitting was a major turning point in the trial. So during the trial, OJ was asked to put on the leather gloves, with one being found at the murder scene and one being found at OJ's Rockingham estate. The gloves both ended up not fitting. However, the gloves were frozen and unfrozen many times, causing them to potentially shrink. And OJ also did not take his arthritis meds for many days leading up to the trial with the hope of his hands swelling. Simpson also had 2 pairs of latex gloves on, which made it almost impossible to actually get the gloves on. Besides this, there was also OJ's blood, Nicole Brown Simpson, and Ronald Goldman's blood found on that glove. Eventually, the gloves would be called into question, as Mark Furman was accused of planting the glove at OJ's Rockingham estate due to his tapes. So OJ's limo driver was at Simpson's house to take him to the airport. When the driver rang the doorbell, nobody answered, and someone resembling Simpson walked into the house. And then when the driver rang the doorbell again, OJ was there. So this seems to imply that it was OJ walking across the driveway. OJ's book. So after the trial, OJ Simpson wrote a book about himself called If I Did It, where he talks about what he would do if he were to commit a murder. The book goes into many specific details only a killer can know. A later interview explains how when Simpson was talking about his book, he started in third person but later started speaking in first person as if he did it. The book was renamed from If I Did It to If I Did It, Confessions of the Killer. Other evidence. Unusual shoe prints were found that perfectly matched expensive shoes that OJ only wore. Only 299 copies of the shoe were ever made. Simpson had a history of beating and threatening Nicole. Blood from both victims were found on Simpson's car. Simpson had no solid alibi for the night of the murders. 5 blood drops found on the footpath at the crime scene matched Simpson's blood, and was all on the left shoe print, the same side that Simpson had cut his hand with that night. Simpson failed a polygraph test miserably with a score of -22. The average score is a -6 for people who are lying. So why we think OJ was acquitted? So we think that previous incidents of racism by the LAPD had a major part to do with it, including the Rodney King beating, the Latasha Harlan shooting, and the 39th and Dawn house trashing. OJ's race debate was also a part of this, as OJ was a black man. It was used extensively and highlighted by Johnny Cochran mostly during the course of the trial. The majority of the jury was black, with 9 out of 12 jurors being black. A major argument was also Mark Furman saying the N-word over 40 times in one sitting, and being caught on tape, which saw those tapes being exposed during the trial and would eventually be shown to the jury. During the time, the LAPD was shown to be very racist, which increased racial tensions in the community, which further separated the races. The Furman tapes were 13-hour interviews with Mark Furman, who was the first detective on the scene at OJ's Rockingham estate. They included many, many, many racist and misogynistic slurs used by him. The tape was used to destroy the credibility of Furman, who lied under oath previously about saying them. Therefore, it became a central part of the argument defending O.J. Simpson. Dennis Fung was responsible for collecting evidence at both crime scenes. He mishandled the evidence, which led to another way for the defense to prove reasonable doubt. The defense argued that Fung framed O.J. Simpson due to the lack of care handling evidence and for getting blood samples from the crime scene. And then the most major one was O.J. trying on the glove. Chris Darden, who is the prosecutor, argued that the murderer would be able to try the glove on and it would fit. However, due to many factors like the glove being frozen and unfrozen multiple times and the fact that blood seeped in the fabric and shrunk the glove, resulted in OJ not being able to fit into the glove. It massively damaged the reputation of the prosecution, and the argument that they were making would later be disproven. So therefore, given this, the evidence and arguments given by defense and prosecutions eventually tipped in favor of the prosecution, with tons of DNA evidence lining up against OJ, and OJ not having a good alibi and having a great motive. However, he would be found not guilty due to the fact that the prosecution made many errors, resulting in reasonable doubt being put in the juror's mind. Ultimately, OJ would go free. However, he would later lose a civil lawsuit for wrongful deaths to the Goldman and Brown family, and he would be forced to pay millions to them in damages. Overall, Simpson would never recover from this, and he would eventually go to prison for around 13 years for being involved in bank robberies in Vegas. However, Simpson is now a freed man and lives his life, while the Brown and Goldman families still haven't forgiven him.
Thank you for watching. The end.